360, more protests and another shooting as the president threatens to invoke the Insurrection Act. And the head of Homeland Security says if you're near an ICE operation, you too could be stopped and asked to prove you're an American. Also tonight, just a day after the president backs away from military action against Iran, another carrier strike group heads toward the region. And Venezuela's opposition leader visits the White House and, like so many others seeking favors, gives the president another gold medal. This time it's a big one, the one he's long pined for, the Nobel Peace Prize. But will giving away the gold get her anything in return? Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with the President of the United States threatening to send troops to Minneapolis and his officials scrambling to justify what thousands of federal officers are already doing in the city. It follows a night of unrest after a federal officer shot a man in the leg. According to the Department of Homeland Security, they were trying to arrest him when he violently resisted, helped by two others, DHS says, armed with a snow shovel and broom handle. The attack sent the officer to the hospital and triggered clashes like this one nearby. By this morning, the president was online threatening, in his words, to, quote, institute the Insurrection Act, which many presidents have done before me, and quickly put an end to the travesty that is taking place in that once great state. Now, the Insurrection Act allows the deployment of U.S. military personnel domestically under certain limited circumstances. It was last used, you may remember, during the rioting in Los Angeles in 1992, and as you know, it's not the first the first time that he's threatened to invoke it.
We have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. I'm allowed to use the Insurrection Act.
Don't forget, I can use the Insurrection Act, and that's unquestioned power.
We're trying to do it in a nicer manner, but we can always use the Insurrection Act if we want. It's the strongest power a president has, and you have the absolute right to do it. And if we need more than the National Guard, we'll send more than the National Guard.
So you're going to send the military into American cities?
Well, if I wanted to, I could. If I wanted to use the Insurrection Act, you know that I could use that immediately, and no judge can even challenge you on that.
Legal scholars have said that's not necessarily so. In any event, his latest warning did not deter the protesters who clashed with officers throughout the day outside a now familiar federal building near the airport. As they did, the White House was underscoring the president's threat, which Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt directed solely at Democrats, specifying elected officials.
The Insurrection Act is a tool at the president's disposal, and I think the president's Truth Social post spoke very loud and clear to Democrats across this country, elected officials who are using their platforms to encourage violence against federal law enforcement officers, who are encouraging left-wing agitators to unlawfully obstruct legitimate law enforcement operations.
Well, she singled out Minnesota Governor Tim Walz by name, whom she said was, quote, inciting the harassment and illegal obstruction of law enforcement in his state. Now, here's some of what the governor had to say last night.
Let's be very, very clear. This long ago stopped being a matter of immigration enforcement. Instead, it's a campaign of organized brutality against the people of Minnesota by our own federal government. We must protest loudly, urgently, but also peacefully. Indeed, as hard as we will fight in the courts and at the ballot box, we cannot and will not let violence prevail. You're angry, I'm angry. Angry is not a strong enough word, but we must remain peaceful.
Well, in those remarks last night, he encouraged protests, as you heard, but peaceful protests, not violence against federal law enforcement, as Caroline Leavitt suggested, quote, Democrats across the country, elected officials do. This was Minneapolis' Mayor Jacob Frey specifically criticizing people who are not peacefully protesting.
We cannot counter Donald Trump's chaos with our own brand of chaos. And I have seen thousands of people throughout our city peacefully protesting. For those that have peacefully protested, I applaud you. For those that are taking the bait, you are not helping, and you are not helping the undocumented immigrants in our city. You are not helping the people that call this place home.
Now, I want to show you what happened several days ago to a woman named Nimco Omar. The video just came out today. There's no violence in it, and the encounter doesn't last all that long, but it gives you a sense of the kind of random interactions some people are having in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, with federal agents. This woman, Nimco Omar, said she was walking toward a local Somali shopping center when the agent stopped her.
I am here, citizen.
You have an ID on you, ma'am?
I don't need ID to walk around in my city. This is my
Okay,
city.
do you have
This is
some
my
ID
home.
then, please?
I don't need
If
ID.
not, we're gonna put you in the vehicle, we're gonna ID you. Where were you born?
This is my home.
Where were you born?
Minneapolis is my home.
Ma'am, that's not,
This
that's,
is-
we're
this-
doing an immigration check, we're doing a
This is-
citizen
this
check.
is- this is
And
where-
we're asking you where you were born.
This is where I belong. This is my home.
Ma'am, you
And
can
I-
belong here, but where were you
and I am
born?
not. I'm citizen. This is my home.
You realize that if you lie that you're a U.S. citizen,
Minneapolis is my
then
home.
you can get
Minneapolis is
Federal
my home.
charges.
I belong here. I'm sorry. I belong here. I'm not gonna take out an ID.
Now, when asked about this seemingly random check, DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin told CNN, quote, allegations that ICE engages in racial profiling are disgusting, reckless, and categorically false. A person's immigration status makes them a target for enforcement, not their skin color, race, or ethnicity. Now, we don't know Ms. Omar's immigration status, though you heard her say in the video that she was a citizen. Tricia McLaughlin did not say whether the officers in question who let her go had any reason to believe that she was not. Her boss, the head of DHS, Kristi Noem, also weighed in on these kind of stops.
In every situation, we're doing targeted enforcement. If we are on a target and doing an operation, there may be individuals surrounding that criminal that we may be asking who they are and why they're there and having them validate their identity. That's what we've always done, in asking people who they are so that we know who's in those surroundings.
Now, we don't know whether the stop you saw fits Secretary Noem's description. There was some ICE operation in that neighborhood, some criminal, in her words, they were hunting and just went up to that woman, asked her for ID. There have been numerous complaints from Minneapolis and elsewhere, federal agents simply stopping people at random and demanding ID. And it's those complaints and the aggressive tactics of some of these federal agents that are increasingly causing alarm.
But you don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?
Well, I want to go to Minneapolis now. Start off there with CNN Shimon Pro-Kipes. What's the situation outside the federal building?
Yeah, so Anderson, just here in the last few minutes, the tempers have certainly flared. The protesters have been gathering here in front of this driveway into this federal building, and they have been really testing the patience of federal law enforcement. We've been watching cars come in here. The protesters have been blocking the cars, hitting the cars, and now the federal officers here in riot gear and tactical gear have come out. And at some point, what we expect is that they're going to push the crowd back. You can see here, Lionel, let me just show Anderson here. Many of the protesters have been gathering here just outside of the federal building. And for most of the night, they've been allowed to stay here. The only time that they get pushed back or they're told to leave is when they start blocking cars, or when, as you see here, some of them are getting very close into the driveway of this building. Now, the officers you see here in front of me are officers with Federal Protective Services, and there are probably CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, tactical officers here. And Federal Protective Services, they protect federal buildings all across our country. This is much like what we saw, remember, Anderson, in Portland, where protesters would gather at the federal building, agitate the police, confront the police, and then there's a confrontation. And it seems that right now, that is what we're about to see here as these officers are gathering, and they're waiting to see if they're going to move forward and push the crowd back that is standing here behind me, as you can see here, Anderson. There have been a number of protesters who have just been standing back here, holding signs, and here now, federal officials. I think you can hear that, Anderson.
Yeah, we can hear that.
And we're seeing more. We're seeing more federal officials here standing in the back. And
Hey,
they're going
Shimon,
to
how
start
many
to move
protesters
forward here.
are there approximately? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, it's actually, Anderson, it's not many, maybe 100. I mean, it kind of goes from 50 to about 100. It's not a very large crowd, but certainly law enforcement here, they've been allowing them to stay here. But once they start hitting cars, we saw one protester toss a frozen bottle of water at a car, and then you'll see here, Anderson, more federal officials now. And so we're going to start moving back, because we'll start seeing some of the protesters here. They'll start to move back too. They go right to the edge here. The protesters will go right to the edge, and then the federal officials will come out. And we're seeing them here now advance. And we'll see. I expect what's going to happen here now, Anderson, is they're going to push us back. They go right to the line here. And then here we go. They're moving back. And you can see some of them are Customs and Border Patrol officers. And then you see here some pushing here. See, you can see here one of the protesters is coming face to face with police here.
And that protester looks like he's wearing like a motorcycle helmet, is that right?
He is wearing a motorcycle helmet. We've seen a number of them wearing motorcycle helmets. They come prepared. They're wearing gas masks. They have goggles. So they are certainly prepared. And this is what happens. They come face to face. They bring it right to the edge. The police will push them back, get them out of the street, and at some point they will retreat. So I can't hear what they're saying here ahead, but right now we're not seeing any of the law enforcement officials prepared to deploy any kind of tear gas or those pepper balls that are really irritating.
And Shimon,
so right now
does
we're just at
an
the
advance like this, does that mean vehicles are coming out and they want to create a lane to allow vehicles out, or is this just a periodic moving back of protesters?
So this is the first time that I've seen them come out in force like this in the last several hours that I've been here. Usually, Anderson, you're right, they will do this when they want to clear a lane for vehicles. We have seen a number of large caravans of vehicles coming in, and then the protesters will start kicking the vehicles, throwing things at the vehicles, and that is when we would see law enforcement come out. And now, here again, they're just at a standoff with them in a confrontation, and the protesters are yelling at them. But for now, the police are holding back. They're not making any arrests, and they're just holding the line. I don't know. I'm trying to see now. It does not appear that there are any cars coming out at the moment, Anderson. Let me look over here. And so there are more
can you just say again,
protesters
now that you're up close to the federal officers, you said it's not, that's those people there, they're not ICE, they are federal officers who traditionally protect government buildings?
Some of them, but these, what I'm seeing here, it's Customs and Border Patrol officers. So it's probably officers that we would see at the airport, we would see, at, just trying to see what's going on. They're now pulling back. So, yeah, so that's what these are. These are Customs and Border Patrol. I am seeing some DHS, Department of Homeland Security officers. But on the front line right here, Anderson, these are Customs and Border Patrol officers. In Minneapolis, and this is important to know, the Minneapolis State Police, the local police, the Minneapolis police here are not out here at all. This is all being handled by federal authorities. Part of this is federal property, but I think what we have seen, the Minneapolis Police Department is really trying to let the federal authorities deal with this at this moment.
Well, let me ask you, Shimon, given your experience in Portland, if my memory serves me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you were on the ground there at kind of these pressure points between protesters and federal authorities. In Portland, were local police usually on the scene trying to keep protesters back?
Yeah, in Portland, Anderson, you're right. What would happen is the local police, they were there, but they would stay on the outside, but they would have a presence. And part of what they would do is they had kind of like peacekeepers there, and they would try to maintain the peace. We're not seeing any of that here. We're not seeing the state police here. We're not seeing the local police here at all, which is a little different from what we saw in Portland, because we did see, you're right, we did see some local police, but they would not get involved in any of the enforcement action or anything that the federal police did. But what they would do is they would try to maintain the outside, because what was happening in Portland, and we've seen some of that here, there were agitators coming in that were pro-ICE, and they would try to get the crowd going, and fights would start. And so Portland police, in those moments, what they would do is they would break up those fights. Things should, Anderson, calm down here now after what we just saw. I think it's interesting to note, certainly, that we didn't see the federal officers here deploy any kind of tear gas or fire any of the pepper balls. They have that. I've seen several of the other law enforcement officials here. They have that capability. They have those tools with them. But it was interesting to see that they did not use that in this case. They instead just physically, like what you would see covering protests in New York City, other cities, they would just physically push people back. So that was a little interesting, and you know, perhaps trying to de-escalate some of this.
Well, that's what's interesting about Shimon. What's interesting to me about this scene, and again, this is one pressure point between protesters and law enforcement, and you've been there for several hours, and that's the closest they've come. It's interesting that in many scenes we've seen, I don't know if it's less experienced federal officers or others, but in a much more chaotic situation, not as organized, not as regimented in that line. These officers, it seems, far more organized and, strategic, and they move forward, then they move back. Let's hope it stays like that. Shimon, we're going to continue to check in with you. We're going to try to keep your shot up as we continue on. We're now in the federal investigation into the shooting of Renee Good. That set off the recent wave of anti-ICE protests in Minnesota. As we reported earlier, at least 6 prosecutors in the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office resigned this week after pressure from the White House to focus the probe into Renee Good and her widow. Last night, Attorney General Pam Bondi said those prosecutors were actually fired. They didn't resign, that's according to her. A group of lawyers representing the Good family has announced a civil investigation into the shooting. The founding partner of the firm previously represented the family of George Floyd, who was killed by police in 2020, not far from where Ms. Good was killed. They won a $27 million settlement against the city of Minneapolis in that case. I'm joined now by that partner, Antonio Romanucci. Mr. Romanucci, appreciate your time. You've sent a letter to the federal government demanding it preserve evidence relating to the shooting of Mrs. Good. What specifically do you believe authorities may have in their possession? For example, do you think they have additional video from the scene that hasn't been made public yet?
Well, first of all, Anderson, thank you for having me on. And yes, this is the first prong of our civil investigation. We have many different prongs that we're launching, but the preservation of evidence is key. Since we know that there isn't going to be cooperation with the federal government, we need to make sure that when there is time, when the time for litigation comes, that we get the evidence that we need. And that letter of preservation is the first step towards that. We want them to preserve whether it's cell phone video, dash cam video, how they store any of their electronic documents. Everything needs to be preserved. And if they don't preserve it, that could be very problematic.
What is your level of confidence that they will cooperate even with your civil probe? As you know, federal officials have already boxed out state investigators in Minnesota.
Well, look, I would love to have all the confidence in our government doing what they're supposed to do. And that's what litigants do in litigation, is preserve evidence. They don't destroy, they don't spoil anything. They store it appropriately. But because we know that we're getting stonewalled, our level of confidence decreases, and that's why we have to take the steps that we're taking. We have to conduct our own civil investigation on a so-called parallel track without any cooperation, or else we're not going to be able to get to the truth. But we don't know that we're going to get to the truth only with the federal government investigating.
I'm wondering, the 6 prosecutors who are said to have resigned, though the Attorney General says they were actually fired, it seems we're being pressured or told to investigate the Good family. I'm wondering, when you heard that the government, the federal government, was focusing not necessarily on the actions of any federal officer on the scene, but the Goods, their connections, their communications, I suppose. What did you think?
Well, first of all, it's laughable to think that the Goods, that either Renee or Rebecca would be investigated. They are the victims. We're not going to victim blame here. There was a shooter who shot someone who was killed. That's who needs to be investigated. These prosecutors followed the rules. We all have to follow rules on a daily basis, and prosecutors know that there are rules when there's a police-involved shooting with a federal officer. And they know that the rules weren't followed, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they resigned. That's because they know that rules weren't followed.
How important are the statements made by the President of the United States, by the Director of Homeland Security, very quickly after the shooting, labeling Ms. Good a domestic terrorist, or all the allegations that were made, all the comments that were made about her? What part, if any, does that play in your lawsuit?
Well, certainly it plays a part in the lawsuit, Anderson, because to come out and to serve judgment, to render a verdict, to conclude something without a rational basis, without facts, is very disturbing. And it hurt the family very much to have her labeled those words that they labeled her as. And I won't dignify in repeating those words because that's slanderous, I believe. She should not be labeled that, because Rebecca and Renee are good people. Renee is a housewife. She is a mother. She's a daughter. She's a sister. She is many things to many people, not what the government labeled her as.
The Director of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Homeland Security, hours very quickly after the shooting, had said that Ms. Good had been following these ICE agents for a long period of time, for much of the day. There had been reporting she had dropped a child off at school. I believe the shooting took place around 9:30 a.m. local time. Can you clarify whether or not Ms. Good had, in fact, been following those ICE agents for a long period of time?
Well, if she had been following the ICE agents, and Kristi Noem has that information, then we'll look forward to seeing it. We want to know, was she followed? Was she tailed? Was there a video of this? How long has she been following them? We know where Renee was. She was on Portland and 33rd and 34th. So what else is it that they know that we should know? If they have information, be transparent about it. Let's hear it. Let's see it.
Antonio Romanucci, I appreciate talking to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Anderson.
Coming up next, we'll have more on the federal effort to quell the protests in Minneapolis and the local backlash to it. We'll be joined by our own CNN legal and law enforcement analyst, as well as former Minneapolis police chief, as our breaking news coverage continues. Also, sending a signal or planning for action. The U.S. takes a big step toward ramping up military pressure on Iran a day after the commander-in-chief appeared to back off.